in global history on Long Island for 25 years. I presented all over the United States for both history, social studies, and also for home economics, because my best friend was a home ec teacher, and we took the show on the road. I did the culture and she did the food, and received 21 awards, and also presented in Africa and Australia. And done a lot of traveling. I should have been at 101 countries, but my knee replacement did not go as well as Pat's, although I had the same excellent surgeon. I think it's my broken down old body. And I had to cancel my trip to Slovenia and Croatia, so I'm only at 98 countries. All right, I want to start with the map of Africa and show you some of the places we're going to talk about when we talk about art. We're going to start with South Africa, and then Mozambique, Zimbabwe, Tanzania, Kenya, Democratic Republic of the Congo, Gabon, Benin, and Ghana. And just briefly, I'm going to talk about Cameroon, and just briefly, I'm going to mention Egypt, okay? Now, something I always wanted to do was to spend a month in South Africa. And of course, I taught Nelson Mandela. So my students years ago wrote letters when he was still in prison to be freed. But I also have always been kind of in love with the San people, also known as the Bushmen, and their petroglyphs and their rock art. So I was able to spend a month there, travel all over. I went to Robben Island, Nelson Mandela's prison twice. But it's the tours are run by people who spend time there, former prisoners. So that was very interesting. But then most people go to Drakensberg Mountains on the east side. I wanted to go to the Cedarburg Mountains on the west side. I did both. I went across the country because I wanted to see more about the San people. So the very interesting people. They have the oldest gene pool in the world, and they tended to be very isolated. They were hunter-gatherers. And physically, their characteristics, about 5 feet tall, peppercorn tufts of hair, very light in color, often described as yellow, no earlobes, and they speak a click language, which is unrelated to anything else in the world. And being hunter-gatherers, you know, they really had the run of things until the Dutch came over and then pushed them out. And today, you'd be hard put to find many Bushmen or San people who have most of these racial characteristics because they've been forced. You know, when you're a hunter-gatherer, you need space, and all that was taken over. And now even the government would like to put them in, you know, these cement boxes, the same they did with the, you know, the Mongols up in Mongolia. They didn't want them setting up their yurts and, you know, hunting and gathering too. So bottom line is there's been a lot of intermarriage with the Bantu. So it's very hard to find, and it's going to get even harder to find Bushmen who, or San people who have those characteristics. Anyway, as hunter-gatherers, they developed a poison which came from the red caterpillar that was a neurotoxin. So they would put that on the end of their arrows, shoot at the animal. And when it's a neurotoxin, it will, the part of the animal that it hits, you can't touch because there's no cure for this. There's no antidote. You're going to die. So that part you can't touch. The rest of the animal you can eat. Also, the San people have no word for aggression or war in their vocabulary. They had no hierarchy, and everything was resolved by group discussion. Now, when they had to put up with the Dutch, and then, of course, their own government, they would nominate somebody as a speaker. But overall, everything was, you know, more decentralized. And women sometimes hunted, and men sometimes gathered. So very, very interesting culture. In general, very gentle people. Has anybody ever seen the movie The Gods Must Be Crazy? Yeah, so, you know, the first 20 minutes about the San people are pretty legitimate. The rest of it is garbage. Okay, when you go, you have to have a guide because Now we're talking about people more than 10,000 years old. So all of these areas are in very, very iffy areas now. And if you fall into one of these crevasses, you're finished. They can't get you out. So you travel with a very small group. I was with just two other people and a guide who was part San. And his parents had intermarried with the Bantu because there were no San people for them to marry. Now, when you look at other petroglyphs and other rock art, which I'm kind of addicted to, so I've seen a lot of it, you often see different colors. The only thing you're going to see here is a white background, and you're going to see reddish ochre color. They totally eschew blue or yellow or green, so it's always going to be these colors. It's not that it's faded over time, that's what they used. And when you're looking at them, it's difficult sometimes to distinguish between male and female, but you're dealing with males when you have the bows and you have the quivers and large calves. Now, see, this guy has very large calves, so we know that he's a male. Now, in any Aboriginal culture, doesn't matter if it's Native American or African or anything else, you always have a large connection with the spirit world. Even the Chinese, for millennia had ancestor worship. So when you have a concern, you want to consult with the ancestors in the spirit world to help you resolve whatever difficulties you have. And they did it pretty much the way that Native Americans, they didn't use any addictive or any narcotic substances. What they did was they fasted and they dehydrated. And once they had blood coming from their nose, they felt that they were in a hallucinogenic state, and then they could discourse with the spirits. Now, this is, when I first saw that, before I spoke to the guy, I just assumed, that it was a spirit, but it's actually a San person. And that hole in the rock, that's one of their entries into the spirit world. So that's talking about the man going into the trance, going in to communicate with the spirits. Now, when everything, our new president certainly appoints it, we live in a transactional world. Everything's quid pro quo. You want this, you got to do that. So it was the same for the San people thousands of years ago. So they felt if they were going to ask the ancestors and the spirits to grant them some boon, they had to give something back. So you give back your most valuable possession. And what is your most valuable possession if you're a hunter or gatherer, right? Your arrows and your quivers. So in the drawing, these two lines are can't see my finger, can you? This is your entry into the spirit world, and then here are your quivers and your arrows. So now, hopefully, the ancestors will be able to offer you whatever advice or solace you want. Now, they hunted, of course, big game animals that no longer exist. They call them buffalo, elephants. You look at them and you're like, you sure? And they were very fond of the antelope, something called an elan. And even today, when they reenact hunts, they have a little round thing made out of a gourd that goes about here, and then two elan tufts coming out of that. Now, again, I was so excited about this because I had seen this in the Southwest US, Native Americans, East Africa, and even Australia. And here I was in South Africa, and it's the same human signature. It's not like, when the police are after you. This is, here is my hand. I have to press it into this substance, and I'm leaving my impression. I'm signing it, if you will. And when I also saw with the San people, I was really excited because obviously this is very universal. Okay. Now we're going to talk about the Ashanti. And I did not present at this conference in Ghana. I presented in Kenya, but I was there for a couple of weeks, and very, very interesting. I'm sure a lot of you have seen these dolls because they tend to be very popular. I have one, and I think I did buy in Ghana, but you can buy them pretty much anywhere. These are for when a woman wants to get pregnant, and you can be in good health. You can be in poor health. You can be afraid that somebody's witching you, whatever. And you take this doll and you tuck it in the front of your wrapper and you treat it the way you would a child. So you feed it, you put it to bed, you wash it, and hopefully this will bring you a good, safe, and happy pregnancy. And notice the straight form there. This comes from Egypt. I'm going to talk about Egypt just for a moment. And hopefully everybody understands cultural diffusion and the Sahara salt gold trade, and even a trade with Egypt. And basically what happens is, now this is the trans-Saharan salt gold trade, and Ghana, Shanghai, and Mali, which I taught, this is in the Middle Ages. And these guys cross the Sahara, slaves, gold, salt, whatever. And then Egypt, which of course traded with the Nubians, and you realize, I would always have a student that would say, oh no, Mrs. Vaswami, you're wrong. Remember, rivers rise in high places, so they rise in the mountain, and this is the mouth. And it's not that the Nile flows backwards, it's that the earth is around structures. So this is the mouth, the end of the Nile. So, you know, the Egyptians, of course, papyrus, which you're familiar with, flax, you know, the precursor to linen, stones. They weren't the first to develop glass. The Phoenicians were, but glass and stones. And of course, I'm sure everybody remembers, Egypt was the granary for the Roman Empire. The climate was different. There was more rainfall. And, you know, I'm not going to go into Cleopatra and Julius Caesar or any of that, but they supplied the majority of grain, just like Ukraine did, you know, for Russia and the rest of the world. That's what they did. So when you have cross-cultural contact, yes, you learn ideas, you learn skills, you transfer goods. I think even when Christopher Columbus came to the New World, and all of a sudden we got tomatoes and we got corn and all sorts of other exciting things, and they got syphilis and other things. But what happens is also religion. So when you think about, you know, how Islam, which came, of course, over here from Saudi Arabia, that's how Islam got all the way down. It never got past the Sahara. That stayed Christian and that stayed animistic, but right up here because of the trade. Also, once they had camels, now I didn't realize this, camels 144 million years ago came from North America. So think of the climate we had here. Once they crossed the Bering Strait and they came to Africa, they ended up being marvelous beasts of burden as the climate got drier and drier. And then you had larger and larger caravans and you had more and more trade. So trade depends on a lot of things. I want to talk about the stools. I've always been taken with African stools. And generally, square is a man's stool and round is a woman's stool. And by and large, they believe that your soul goes into the stool. And usually you get it early in life. And then when you die, the stool is turned over because it has your soul, and you can't have anybody else sitting on your soul, obviously. Usually they're owned by the upper class because, you know, it's a big effort, especially if you're not in the tropical rainforest, to find some wood and to carve it out. And as you're going to see, some of these are incredible works of art. They're not just beautiful, they're breathtaking. Now, one of the most valuable stools in the world belong to the Ashanti, and they believed, again, Ghana, that the souls of the Ghanaian people from the past, present, future, yet to come, that they will, hello, Marilyn, that they would be in this golden stool. So when they had their dust up with the British, they decided it was better to let the king be exiled than to hand the stool over to the British. And here is the stool. And I have a question for everybody. Can everybody remember from the history class what Ghana was called before it got its freedom in the 50s? What did the British call it?
The Gold Coast.
That's right. And now you see why. Okay, definitely. And Ghana means warrior king. Now, here is a Makante mask. And I know it looks like metal, but it isn't, it's wood. And again, people have this tendency to say, oh, African art is always so abstract. You know, we think of Picasso lifting from African art, but it isn't always abstract. Some of it is, it's all breathtakingly beautiful, if you ask me, but some of it is so realistic, so naturalistic, it blows your mind. And look at this, you can very clearly see eyes, nose, teeth. He's even got hair, that's waxen hair, and ears. And this is worn by boys who are going through manhood training, reminding them of all their responsibilities if, when they marry and have children and defend the tribe and whatnot. Oh, and the scarification. People sometimes ask about scarification. It was just a means of identity. When you came up against another tribe, because remember, Africa is a huge continent, and you didn't speak the language, then, you know, you could tell by scarification what group this person belonged to. Also, pretty much a right for males and females coming of age to prove that you have the wherewithal to be a positive, active member of the tribe. Now, bronze leopard. If anybody goes to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, to the wing dedicated to Africa, you're going to see some gorgeous things. And you will see many of these beautiful bronze statues from Benin. The problem is that some of them were looted. So these days you're going to see far fewer than used to see. But this isn't from the Met, and this is a leopard. Now, significance iconography. All cultures have iconography, and the leopard is called the watcher. It has vicious fangs. It stands, it's very coy, it's very cunning. It watches for its prey. It has, you know, ferocious claws. And once it springs, you're not going to get away from it. So the leopard has always been a sign of, you know, the king or the emperor or somebody in power, because you want to be dangerous, you want to be cunning, you want to have agility, and you know, you want to be able to see things coming. Now, a lot of people don't know, but the spots on a leopard skin, each one is different. So they can identify each other, and you can identify each other. Scientists have no problems because they can see the difference in the spots the way we would see, I guess, facial configurations. Also, this is made from the lost wax method, which basically you take clay and then inside you pour wax, and then you do more clay outside. Then you put it in the kiln, and then the wax comes out. Then you pour in hot molten metal, usually bronze, and then that bakes in, and then you take it out, you carefully break the clay exterior, and you have a fabulous piece of art. So they were using that early on, okay? This is Joseph Mobutu, who was the former dictator of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, who stole probably billions over the years, helped to impoverish the country, which is very rich in natural resources. But notice, he always wore his leopard skin hat. Maybe many of you who follow the news can remember that. And when he was putting on the dog, he would also wear a leopard skin style shirt. Okay, here's a reliquary statue. Now, the Metropolitan Museum of Art and the Brooklyn Museum have some really lovely examples of this. And basically what it is your connection again with the ancestors in the spirit world. So if you have a tooth, if you have bones, if you have hair, whatever you have from the ancestors, you put them in this bundle, right, at the bottom of the statue, and then you put the statue on top of it as a reminder to people, don't touch it, stay away. This is a reliquary figure, and, you know, it's precious to us, our ancestors. Notice her face is white. And that, by the way, is breast development down there. Now, white is always associated, almost always associated with the spirit world. Notice her ears are big, so she's listening to everything you have to say. Notice her eyes are more inward because she's thinking, she's processing your thoughts, and her mouth is a little exaggerated, so she's ready to speak to you when she has to. These are, I love these, they're absolutely fabulous. And the Met has a very nice collection, okay? Oh, yes, And the sculpture is placed on top again to guard and keep people away. And again, why would you use something like this? Because, you know, you're an early culture. You believe in the power of ancestors. So if you need to resolve a treaty, if you need prosperity, if you're unwell, whatever you are, you're going to the ancestors. In fact, there's, I can't remember now, but a Native American tribe out in the West that literally takes their ancestors' bones and has them like in a loft above them because they don't, and some have them buried underneath them because they want to be close to them, they want to have their guidance, they want to have their love. Now, this is phenomenal. Okay, this is from the 12th century. And I want you to think back, 1100 in Europe. You've got the Vikings ravaging Europe. Okay, you're going to, right on the heels of the Vikings, are going to be the Mongols in Eastern Europe, spreading the plague and vanquishing everything in Eastern Europe and the Middle East and even Asia. And you have deurbanization. Rome has fallen in 476 AD. So you've got pretty much a feudal system. People stay close at home because they're afraid of these marauding hordes. And you know, your art is very simplistic. You're using maybe bright colors that you've inherited from the pagans. And any of your art, or either in your cathedrals or your churches, there's no perspective. Everything's flat, and everything has religious purposes until you get to the Renaissance, and then all of a sudden you get to, you know, beautiful things. So look at this. When we are struggling, you know, just to stay alive, they are capable, the Yoruba in Nigeria. Look at this piece of art. Again, the lost wax method. Perfectly executed eyes, nose, lips, ears, even the scarification, the lines, okay, running down, even those are perfect. So when people think that, or make a statement about the Africans out of ignorance, they just have no idea. At our lowest point was really their highest point. And again, this came from Ife, which was always considered the center of the world to the Nigerians. How did they make their money? Glass beads. In Africa, always glass beads, brass tacks, not conch shells, those little tiny, I can't think of the name of them, little tiny shells. Those were always a medium of commerce and considered very valuable, and you know, helped to make the area very successful. Now, I love these, and you're never going to see these in the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Why, I do not know. But if you go to the Brooklyn Museum of Art, you will see a lovely collection. And these again are from Nigeria. They're beaded, and beads, you know, very, very valuable in Africa, usually reserved for the upper class. This is what the king would wear. They're always conical in shape, and the birds, really a reminiscence of the power of women, because the Oba could not rule without women. A lot of these cultures were matriarchal or much more egalitarian. Also, the birds represent coming back and forth into the spirit world. The faces, our ancestors are very important personages. And notice these beads covering the face. It's very much like China or Japan, where you were never allowed to look at the emperor. When the emperor was coming by, everybody had to look down. You could be struck dead, or you could be eliminated by looking at the emperor, or you could be struck dead because of the power of his personage. So it's the same type of thing. You shouldn't look at the chieftain directly. You should be, you know, looking at the beads, okay? One other thing I wanted to say. Yes, and the repeated patterns suggest the interconnectedness of things, all right? And this one of my favorites too. The Metropolitan has a collection of these, and these are hard to get because these really are religious items. And what happens is that where that mirror is, the mirror is removed, and you put in some medicine, and then you have the spiritual person, the shaman or whoever, blow the breath of life into it. You seal it with the mirror. The mirror is your back and forth between the spirit world, and you can see the mouth is open. He's willing to speak to you. The eyes are open. He's observing everything. He has large ears. He's hearing. And what are the nails? I would always invariably have a student who would say, well, somebody just didn't like the statue and put all those nails in. But the nails are there because when you want that medicine, that soul, that spirit to come out and to aid you and assist you, the shaman or the most holy person in the tribe would hammer one of those nails in, and then that spiritual essence would come out and be of assistance to you. And here is another lovely, lovely piece. It's round, so we know that the chief in this instance was a woman. Take a look at her beautiful coiffure. See how beautiful that is? Absolutely well done. Large eyes so you can see you, okay? She's pulling her ears out to make sure that she is ready to hear you. She's got scarification on her shoulders and arms. And we're down to brass tacks here. Remember I said brass and tacks, very, very valuable? It really is, and it's really a caryatid. And you've seen caryatids when you look at a lot of ancient Greek architecture, and you see the temples, and you see the very roof of it, and then you see a sculpture of a woman, and then you see the bottom of it. So it looks like a woman is holding up. It's almost always a woman. The temple. This is the same concept, only you're sitting on it in stool. And I have one of these. Mine is different. Mine, her hair is pulled back. She has a smaller cap, and her scarification is on her shoulders. And scarification on your shoulders and the woven cap in the Congo are definitely signs of political, not necessarily kingship, but political power. And mine has, oftentimes they have file teeth and they have leopard skin necklace. She doesn't, and mine doesn't have file teeth either, but mine has just a plain necklace. And she's holding her child. Her breasts are exaggerated because they're not ornamental, they give life. And she is a political figure. She has to raise this child properly so that this child can also go into the politics of the tribe and do an excellent job. And yes, she's undergone the rites of passage. As men have to, women have to too. This one I love. Look how light this is. Look how airy it is. The man who carved this was called the master of the Cascade coiffure. And basically how this is done, you take palm fronds and then you take clay and you take oil and you create your hairstyle. But when you have a hairstyle like this, it's going to last a while, maybe a month or so, you need a neck rest because you can't put that on the ground. So again, look at the beads. We've got beads in 3 places now, very valuable. And look how balanced it is. One arm is up, one arm is down. There's a slight twist to it. It really is absolutely beautifully, beautifully executed. And it does have a lightness to it. All right. And this is, I've never seen it in person, but I did see it in a video at the Brooklyn Museum of Art. And I spent hours on the internet trying to find a picture of this for you, and I could not. But this is Gabon. These are men. They wear this female mask. You can see the scarification, the eyes again thinking inside, the ears against the lips. And they get on stilts, and other men from the village carry them out. People are sitting all around on the ground, and they come out on their stilts, and they have brooms of grass. And as they're going through the group, they're going to fall, they're waving their brooms of grass, purifying, sanitizing. And sometimes they stop, they get off their stilts, and they pick somebody up from the crowd and they hold them in their arms. It is the most touching thing. As I said, they almost threw me out of the Brooklyn Museum because I was really hogging the video, but I've never seen it anywhere else, and it is absolutely magnificent. Now, this is the best I can do, and it is totally unrelated, totally. They're not wearing the mask, but if you didn't know about the raffia, the grass, because I didn't want you to think it was green grass and the brooms, this just gives you an idea of that. But if you ever get an opportunity, Oh my goodness, it's just so moving. You can feel the power of the group. You know, you can feel the desire of people to be united with this. It's just incredible. Maybe that's why it's not on the internet, but I did see that video in the Brooklyn Museum of Art. And when you get there, they have a very nice African collection, also a very nice Egyptian collection. I would advise you, if you can, see that video. And those beautiful beaded crowns, they also really excel with that. Okay, this is my last slide, and this is kente cloth. And I was in Ghana, and I always wanted some kente cloth. I have a collection of about 90 costumes. In fact, I'm going to do an international fashion show at the library because I haven't used them in years. One of these days. It's going to be a while, though. Anyway, it's very expensive. And if they weave gold threads in it, it's even more expensive. And I was fortunate because I was at a conference, so I got to buy it from Tops craftspeople. But the story is with the kente cloth that two Akan, as that's Ghanaian name for the people, one of the groups in Ghana, were out in the forest hunting, and they came upon a spider, and they were so transfixed that they stayed there for 2 days watching the spider weave. And then when they returned to the village, they tried to replicate it. So that's how you get the, the kente cloth. Now I have like a little hat, like a Nehru hat, and maybe it's about this wide, like a scarf type of thing. But I couldn't afford anything else. It was just very expensive. Also, if some of you are thinking to yourself, oh, now I know the colors that go with Kwanzaa, don't. Because Kwanzaa just uses black, green, and red. They don't use blue, they don't use yellow. And actually, Kwanzaa has nothing to do with Africa. This professor, Molana from Berkeley, just wanted African American people in the 60s to develop some pride. So he took basic African concepts and turned them into Kwanzaa. So, these you're not going to find any of the, all you're going to find is the green, the red, and the one black handle in the center. All right, that's it. Hopefully everybody learned something and enjoyed it. Anybody questions, comments? Shelby, you must, because you have a lovely collection of African art. So I'm sure you have something to say.
Well, I do have something to say, actually. I think it's confusing to call it African art. Africa is a continent.
Mm-hmm.
And
different tribal groups, yes.
And let's just go to modern days, different countries. Many more countries there than in any other continent, right?
Yeah, 52.
And so I've always felt it was easier to talk about West African art.
Yes.
And be very clear that when you jump over to the Kente and the Koala dolls,
Right.
That's West Africa.
Right.
And those traditions
East
are
and
not the
South
same.
anymore. Right.
But what I liked about Utah was so beautiful and wonderful is that in all of the, and then there's Central Africa, Gabon, and
Yes.
Angola, and then East Africa is completely different.
Oh, yes.
So much influenced by Islam.
And there was no slavery. They came to West Africa.
And then South Africa, of course. But it's confusing, I think, to say African art, African heart. I would like people to remember that these are separate areas, and in the areas. For instance, in Ghana, you will not see very many traditional carvings of people. That's from another culture completely, and the concept. But what links them all, well, they're not linked to me, but what they share is the ancestor worship. But it's different in Ghana. There's no like holes that we go into, and the people that call on the ancestors look upwards, not in. It's wonderfully complex and varied. Now the Kente, I can tell you a little bit about the Kente. My husband was married in a Kente, and we were married. He had the Kente, I had a white dress, and it is woven, as you said, in strips, silk and cotton. That's why it's so expensive. And it's wonderful to watch them to leave. But they all have names. And the canty that my husband wore at our wedding was called the Queen from Across the Water.
Mhm.
And it doesn't have
Very apropos, marrying you.
Hmm?
Very apropos, marrying you.
Well, that's what I said. And he started to laugh and said, no, it has two names. One was another queen, and the other one was that Ani and Puma's wife came from Egypt. Mind you, there's not much water between them, but anyway, yeah, so they all have names. And they are hundreds and hundreds of dollars to get them. And they're worn. This is something that fascinates me. Maybe you know the answer. They're worn like a toga. And yet there's really no connection between Rome and.
Well, now I tried to show you that there is to some extent. You know, as I said, Egypt was the granary for the, the Roman Empire.
The Ghana Empire is way.
Yes, that's on the west,
Uh-huh.
but you did have the trans-Saharan. So, and yes, and the Egyptians mostly in early years stayed on the Nile with the Nubians, but then they got involved in that. And the idea, okay, so you're a trader, so you go to Egypt. I used to say to my students, when a merchant or a trader comes in his bag, he's got his lunch, he's got his garments, he's got his religion, his culture, maybe even has some jokes and some stories. And when he's moving from place to place, he's bringing ideas with him. And then they're settled and they're absorbed by the culture or part of the culture. Sometimes they're suppressed and they reappear for thousands of years.
Yeah, but it's not really very well documented. And strangely enough, the toga thing is basically the Akan. You don't find it in South Africa, Central Africa. It's just an interesting phenomenon. Yeah, and it takes about 8 yards of that heavy silk cloth to wear that. The other thing is the that you mentioned, the fertility dolls.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I saw a few of those when I mean, people using them when I was there. Yeah, but the face, the head is supposed to be the ideal baby's head.
Yes,
And the face is very flat.
yes.
And my mother-in-law used to get upset that I wasn't massaging my 2 or 3 month old baby to make the face. But it turned out that they all have flat foreheads anyway.
Peruvians did the same thing. And you had the baby on the, what is that board called? Oh, I can't think of it, that you put the baby on in Native Americans. I can't think of the technical term for it. But but because you needed to have that was considered attractive. Also, you should be cross-eyed. Now we're talking about Incans, so you would, be doing things like that. That was an attractive person, a flat forehead and crossed eyes.
Yeah, I think the other big difference, I think, is that the accounts, the biggest group in Ghana, are matrilineal, and very few African tribes. And I really like that. I think it's splendid that the
even the Nagars in India, on the west coast of India, they're matriarchal. And even with the San people, they're not matriarchal, but there's much more equality there. I mean, where are you going to see a woman hunting and a man gathering? There are different groups, and it's like in China. Women, the upper class could afford bound feet because they were sitting around all day. Women working out in the fields, you had to have big flat feet so you could keep going. I think in cultures, things are decided really upon utility in many cases.
Yeah,
Beliefs and
the
utility.
reason that one of the offshoots of the Kanu group being matrilineal is because only the woman knows the father of her child. The man will never know because he's not with her every moment. But she is the only one that could pass the inheritance. And part of the naming ceremony in Aka is the woman comes out with the baby, the man is in the background, and the person doing it says, "Who's the father of this child?" So which is sort of amusing. I wonder if she always tells the truth. But she does, I guess. It's her husband standing right there. She better say it's him.
No, I certainly would. Now, it's the same thing with the Iroquois. a matrilineal culture. And when they have a celebration, you know, the men go to their mother's house or their aunt's house, and the male children, and the women go to their mother's house or their aunt's house. And that's strictly natural. And it was the same with the Iroquois. The women had, the warriors could not do anything unless the women agreed to it. And the same thing with the Nair. And the Nair, if you have a boy, it's sorrow in the family, you want a girl, because that's how the name is passed down, and that's where all the power comes from. It's interesting. It is. All right, anybody else?
What was the significance of the scarification that you talked?
Oh, scarification, most people believe it was just a form of two forms. One for identity, because, you know, as Penelope points out, you've got, you know, 52 nations. And before the Europeans came, and everybody just wandered every other place. And the other thing is to prove your mettle as a fit man or woman to be able to, you know, the same thing with, oh my goodness. Oh, my mind is not working at all today. You know, when circumcision, you know, you don't do it as a baby, you do it when they're early teens, and you know, you have to prove that you can stand the pain. So you can defend the tribe, you can defend your family, you can hunt for them, you can, you know, you have to prove that you're worthy to be a member. Otherwise, you're always kind of, same thing with the Native Americans. You kind of shunted off to the side, you know, because you don't have the wherewithal that it takes to do the needful.
So somebody formed the scarification
Oh, yes.
on them?
Yes, you don't do it yourself. Yes, there's somebody designated.
The original,
And usually what they do is, and I can't speak for the whole continent, but you take, you know, a metal object, you make this, and then you put some dirt in there. And then, you know, as it heals, you have the, you know, the ridges. Yes, thank you, the ridges, right. And it,
I'm sorry, what did you say? The what?
ridges, she said ridges.
Make
So,
ridges.
yeah, because when it's healing over that dirt, you know,
Yeah.
so you're going to get, you know, ridges, or what's the word I want, you know, something that's.
well,
Thank you. Perfect. Okay. Anybody else?
Sheila,
Oh, Sharon, speak.
Yeah. When we first described the Sun people, they sounded a little bit like the Aborigines of Australia. You said they had the blonder hair. So could you tell me if there's anything at all? Because you said it was the oldest gene pool, and I was kind of fascinated by that.
Yep. No, I don't know that there's any connection. But maybe there is, because you know, they were both in South Africa, but no one's ever made that connection. And you know, the Aborigines tend to have a bigger brow, they're taller, they have long straight hair, where the San people have the small, you know, peppercorn tufts. And the Aboriginals tend to be like a light brown to a medium brown. No one would ever describe them as yellow. They've always had, you know, earlobes where the sun, and their language is totally unlike the Click language. But that's it. You know, I never thought of that. That's a brilliant
You
connection.
mentioned the lighter hair and things like that. So I was just,
Yeah,
sometimes you see the Aborigines and
Yeah.
they're light and they don't look like anybody else on earth. So
yeah. And the
Just-
sad
just
thing
wondering.
is, because bad enough what the Dutch did, but then their own government did it. You know, like I said, it's the same thing in Mongolia. It was very sad when I was in Mongolia, because they don't want you wandering around with your yurts. They want to put you in these cement boxes. Actually, the same thing happened to the nomads in Saudi Arabia. The government doesn't want you bebopping around. They want development, you know, they want business, they want prosperity. And so you're relegated to living in these little miserable concrete boxes, which is, in fact, in Mongolia, some of them have their yurts right outside the miserable blocks, because, you know, they don't want to live like that. They're nomadic people. And, you know, it's very sad. But when your own country does it to you, so there's so few real San people left, it's going to continue that way. Because in order to continue on, they intermarry with the Bantus. So those characteristics, you know, are muted or gone. I didn't put a picture up, but the gentleman's hand you saw, you know, with the cow's mouth, he was part San, and he did tend to have maybe peppercorn tufts of hair, but he had perfect earlobes. He had, I would say he was a light brown. And also, frankly, I don't like white South Africans being there a month, I saw unspeakable behavior. And that was, when was I there? 20, like 15, 16, something like that. And being there for a month and all over the country, I got to see a lot. But, you know, he was discriminated against, I have to say, by the guides who were white South African. And I saw the same thing on safari on the other side of the country in the Drakensberg Mountains, that anybody who was African was, in fact, we invited our guide, my former student, his wife and his son decided they wanted to come along with me to South Africa. They only stayed 2 weeks, I stayed for a month. And she had been in the Peace Corps in Kenya. So we loved our guide. We were the Americans, all the South Africans got the white guys. This guy was fabulous. He'd even written a book and they wouldn't put his name on it, a catalog. It was awful. He was a teacher. He was no moron. So we invited him to have dinner with us at the table, and they were tuck, tuck, tuck. And we said, hey, we made a lot of this. We want him at the table. So the others, the next day, all the white guys got to sit with their, you know, we were just, anyway, don't get me started. You don't want to be here all day. But it's criminal when your own country destroys your culture in the name of modernity, and they're doing it left and right in Saudi Arabia too. There's hardly any Bedouins left, and not just Saudi Arabia. You know, the whole Persian Gulf there. All right, anybody else?
That one was it. Colonialism destroyed the maternal systems, not completely, because people know the maternal system, because it was the Dutch who came before the British. They wanted to take a census of people, and they had to have a last name. And the Fanti tribe, which is an Akan tribe, they don't have last names. They have ancestor names, they have names, day names, and so that when they took the census, they just assigned names. So when you go to Ghana, and I was teaching, and you take your first roll call, you have the Casey Hayford, and you look around for an ambassador's kid.
Right.
It's Ghanaian for many, many generations. My name, Gartin, when they came to write the name, the person standing before them doesn't have a last name. Well, what is your name? And they have a clan name, and they have a hunting name, and the hunting name, or the ancestor's name for my husband's family was Lion, which is Jata.
Right.
And the poor Dutchman could not take that. So he made it into a guttural Garchi. And so that's how we got our name. And that's from, that's the problem with, and so of course, that was soon as you go from a oral culture to a written culture, it's sealed. And of course, not with the computers. Everybody Ghana has a last name.
Well, the same thing happened to the Sikhs in India. Everybody was Singh for Lion. We opened the phone book and everybody and their brother is Singh. So they ended up the same thing, having to adopt a name. And that's, that, and look at the people that came to Ellis Island. Oh, no. I think my father's name is O'Kent. It got changed to Kent. They didn't need that. Sounded more British. So it is, and colonialism is, and any dominant culture oftentimes, I was reading, I think I'm a little behind, but National Geographic, and was talking about, what is it? Denbison, the, Homo sapiens, Homo erectus, and then Neanderthal, and this new group they found, and how, there's intermarriage. The Neanderthals were grabbing their wives, and so this whole group disappeared, and how the superior culture will take what they want from the existing and then wipe it out and, predominate.
For your presentation, thank you. I also wanted to acknowledge in future programs, Penelope, we set a date for March. You're going to speak for yourself on, is that correct?
I'm here.
You can set a date in March for the presentation.
Oh, and I want to acknowledge the great debt I have to Lori Stewart, because I wouldn't have been able to do this without her up here working.
March 30th.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, how do I get out of here so you can take this back?
Yeah, you are back.
Okay.
We're good.
You're fine, Sheila.
Okay, let me see if I can just get myself out of here. Okay, so now I would like to, well, I'll do one more reading and then I'll invite everybody for refreshments. Okay. What we call a beginning is often the end, and to make an end is to make a beginning. The end is where we start frozen. We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time, and that's T.S. Eliot. All right, guys, ciao now.
Well, another, Segue playing.
Oh, that's right. I'm so sorry, Steve. I forgot. We have to extinguish the flame before we eat. I must be hungry. Hopefully, we have not extinguished the flame of friendship and gratitude and love. Yeah, don't worry about it. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Sheila. That was wonderful.
Sheila, it was great. See you all again.
It was amazing.
Yeah.